you all. So welcome to my work in progress seminar for a PhD, and I'm working on engaging communities in shaping trusted human AI collaboration through participatory design. Thank you, Eleni, and thank you, Sondas, for getting me this far, as well as my research project team in the journey. So today I'd like to describe my journey so far on rigorously imagining possible futures for human AI teaming and education research. I've packed an anticipatory and participatory epistemology that embraces an ontology of multiple futures co-constructed to reflect the diversity of human knowledge and experience. I think the rapid social integration of generative AI, for example, ChatGPT, Bard, and Claude, has really motivated me to reconfigure how I interact with these fast approaching futures. And my responsibility as an education researcher working with AI and artificial intelligence is to ensure that research into these futures is aligned with our community's values. So from this normative stance, I agree with Sal Khan of Khan Academy that the most poetic use case, if artificial intelligence can be used to enhance HI, or human intelligence, human potential, and human purpose. And so to that end, I'll go through some of the key concepts in the research project and that are perhaps a little unfamiliar for an education audience. I'll present my research questions, which are still very much a work in progress, but should give you a bit of an idea of where it's heading. I'll describe how the research design and methodology has been formulated and go through some of the methods that I've actually used in the field so far. I'll present some of my findings and talk about my current work. So the allusion to a journey is no accident. My conceptualization of curriculum as a kind of complicated conversation is informed by William Pinard's sort of verb of curriculum, the Latin currere, meaning to run the course. It's also, my conceptualization of curriculum is also informed by a more pragmatic stance from Kathleen Graves that defines curriculum as the processes and products of planning, teaching, and evaluating a course of studies or related courses. Adding to this is a definition we used back in 2021 in a position paper of machine education as the design of educational systems and processes that promote the social integration of artificial intelligence by allowing humans to focus more on communicating a body of knowledge to the machine, and less on the computational, data, and engineering concepts associated with how the machine learns. So added to this is the notion of future studies, which is the discovery, invention, and examination and evaluation of and proposal of possible, probable, and preferable futures. This harnesses anticipatory awareness or anticipation of the future from Miller, as well as accessing these futures through the perceptual knowledge of futures of participants in the research study. I'm influenced also by design-based research studies, and that's this pragmatic orientation to meeting the needs of users of educational resources and a commitment to documenting the process of design, a bit of a travel log, if you will, on the journey. And the subject matter for this educational journey is this idea of human AI swarm shepherding teaming. And that's two things, really. This is the idea of humans and artificial intelligence working together in teams, and swarm shepherding, which is, think of a flock of sheep or a flock of birds even as well, and moving them from one location to another, so the guidance and control of them. The questions that I use, my research questions are composed of an overarching research question of how can participatory curriculum design and future studies enable the education of human AI swarm shepherding teams, and two sub-questions which broadly align with the kinds of research efforts that I've been doing so far. The first one being, how can the educational needs and domain knowledge requirements of future human AI swarm shepherding, inform the design of curriculum proposals, and how can a curriculum proposal be tailored and adapted for specific swarm shepherding application domains to enable the delivery experience to human AI teams. I chose Maxwell's interactive approach to research design to investigate these research questions. It centers the research questions in the middle, as they're the components that interact with all the other components the most. In the top left, you can see my personal, professional, and academic goals of enabling the education of future human AI teams, contributing to this machine education space, and promoting education research as the means for social integration of AI. This connects to the research questions and the conceptual framework over on the right, which is founded on critical realist approach to future studies and that pragmatic orientation to design-based research that I mentioned earlier. In the bottom left are some of the methods that I've used so far of interviews, hybrid strategic scenarios, thematic analysis, and questionnaire, and I'll go into those in a bit more detail. And on the right is a validation framework, which I'll also provide a bit more detail on. To address these research questions and to sort of enact the map that I've laid out for you, I've split my research into what I'm calling these design inquiry cycles. I've used 2 cycles so far, and having completed one, and in each of the 2 cycles, I'm combining design and inquiry activities to develop both the processes and the products of curriculum. While the figure before you appears linear, it's actually iterative and interactive, with the design processes speaking to the inquiry throughout and vice versa, in that kind of complicated conversation that Pinar talks about. I take a processual view of validity to constructing validity, which involves attending to criteria such as credibility and authenticity, criticality and integrity, explicitness, vividness, and creativity, and analytic generalizability there on the left, before, during, and after these design inquiry cycles. So, for example, I used an evaluative instrument to both address the credibility and authenticity of findings and communicate the products of the design process to participants. The research design visualizes how this is played out in the first cycle. So design inquiry processes are presented by the coloured rectangles, and the products of each are linked with double lines below. The colours represent the participatory element, with sort of this orangish colour being myself, the purple being my research team, and the blue in this design inquiry cycle being the knowledge community of experts from human AI swarm shepherding. The research questions act as a starting point in the top left, with the triangle decision point at the end, determining whether to continue investigating or to disseminate findings. So I haven't been satisfied that the research question has been answered, so I'm continuing on to cycle 2, which I'll go into in a bit more detail later. So I'll now move on to some of the methods used to enact this research design. No existing methodology was available for the design of educational systems and processes that promote the social integration of AI. So I felt a synthesis was necessary. Machine education design futures is novel and futures-oriented, and it harnesses anticipation to rigorously imagine futures in which humans and artificial intelligence agents learn to collaborate and team together. It combines future studies and educational design research methodologies to enable this rigorous imagining and design of education futures. For example, a hybrid strategic scenario approach creates this focal point for participants to think creatively about ideas and solutions they would not normally think about. In educational design research involves the systematic development of design principles or conjectures that can then be generalized to other contexts. I used a combination of interviews and questionnaires to enact this machine education design futures. In the interviews, I asked 15 human AI teaming and swarm shepherding expert participants to imagine that we were on a multidisciplinary machine education curriculum design team 20 years in the future. The knowledge community spanned 4 academic institutions in Australia, and there was expertise and experience ranging from PhD candidates to professors. Following the data analysis, which I'll go into in a bit more detail, I designed, piloted, and deployed a questionnaire to both to communicate the products of our discussions, as well as to solicit evaluative feedback to further refine the products. So, what were these products or outcomes of these discussions? Well, I've carried out a thematic analysis of the intersection of curriculum design and machine education. I've produced a curriculum proposal embodying 12 plausible curriculum design principles, and I've documented a process for designing machine education curriculum for swarm shepherding application domains. Let's take a look at the use of reflexive thematic analysis. So I used Braun and Clark's 6-phase approach to reflexive thematic analysis, which involved immersion in the data, the transcription of the interview materials and uploading to NVivo, and a detailed coding of the data. I generated initial themes, which you can see depicted here on the right as a kind of, halfway through the process of figuring out what it was all about. And then I developed and reviewed the themes by applying theory from curriculum. Further refinement and definition and naming of the themes occurred in this 5th phase here. And then when I was writing it up, I used Edmund Short's framework to generate a curriculum, a coherent curriculum proposal, which I'll guide you through some parts of now. The curriculum proposal is composed of 6 generic components that you can see before you in the circles. They are a curriculum rationale, outcomes, organisation and sequencing strategies and rationales, content and subject matter, the requirements for enactment of the actual curriculum, and evaluating teaching and learning. So it was a bit of an adaptation of Short's coherent curriculum for every student. The numbers below that represent these 12 curriculum principles or curriculum design principles specific to the human AI swarm shepherding teaming use case, and I'll describe these briefly now. I use Posner and Rudnitsky's concept of a course rationale as a focal idea to make explicit the ideals, values, and educational goals underlying the course. In the actual rationale statement, it reads, the curriculum enables the systematic delivery of experience to both human and artificial intelligence agents to safely achieve teaming capabilities and a high level of trust in shepherding swarms. A range of pedagogies, such as cooperative learning, enact human AI teaching and learning by developing the human and machine capacity to both exercise and evaluate learner autonomy. Now, at this point in the journey, it's important to note that this is an anticipated artifact from a single future as envisioned by myself and participants and the 15 participants through this participatory curriculum design processes that I've outlined so far. The themes and trust and safety provide the focus and purpose for the curriculum, but nevertheless, it is an artifact from the future. It's not something that can be enacted at present. At the bottom of the statement is part of the evaluative response to this statement, in the questionnaire. The participants are asked to consider each statement's plausibility on a 4-point Likert scale of highly implausible, being 1, to highly plausible, being 4, in terms of its scientific adequacy, reasonableness, internal consistency, or how well it aligned with their own conceptualization of the futures of human AI swarm shepherding teaming across multiple application domains. So, for example, you can see here that 7 of the 10 respondents to the questionnaire rated this principle as highly plausible, while 3 gave it a rating of somewhat plausible. For the following principles, I'll only give a brief overview of the content due to the limited time, but I encourage you to view the presentation that's in the meeting chat if you'd like to see it in more detail. There were 3 outcomes generated from the interview data, covering human AI teaching and learning, learner autonomy, and cooperation. Several respondents evaluated outcomes 1 and 2 as somewhat implausible, and their written feedback was integrated into the principles you see before you. The diagram on the left here depicts the range of organisational and sequencing strategies discussed and coded in the interviews. I integrated these with the outcomes and rationale to propose an organisation based on individual and collective needs and sequencing of learning experiences that aims to balance teaming and personalised learning. Again, the initial iteration of these principles generated valuable participant feedback that was integrated into the principles before you. In response to the discussions and the interviews, I proposed knowledge content areas based on domain and agent-specific requirements for safety, with skills, behaviours and capabilities providing the content focus for curriculum events aligned with individual and collective needs. The application domain, meaning what kinds of swarms the teams would be shepherding, flocks of sheep or herds of or flocks of birds, and where forms this subject matter focus in the curriculum. The colour bar shows that these were generally evaluated as somewhat to highly plausible, with some additional feedback and iteration. To enact the curriculum, we'd need simulated team and domain-based problems that could be used to frame the learning experiences. And you'd need domain knowledge, which would be used to identify and align specific tasks and problems for the teams to work on. These requirements were both considered highly plausible by the respondents. To evaluate teaching and learning in the proposed curriculum, but not necessarily the curriculum itself, I developed a competency framework aligned with Bloom's revised taxonomy. From the discussions using co-locations like needs, must, requires, this was evaluated as highly plausible by 8 of the 10 respondents. And the resulting 60-item framework is summarised on the left, comprising the human competencies, the machine competencies on the right, these shared competencies in the middle, and this idea of team competencies of what they would have to be able to do together. There's a truncated version on the right. And for example, shared competency 1, the agent can recognise behaviours and skills and other agents themselves, sits in the cognitive dimension of recognising and the conceptual and strategic knowledge dimensions of the Bloom's taxonomy. So wrapping up, I'm currently working on applying the curriculum proposal to design a course for the specific application of herding sheep with human and artificial intelligence agent teams. The diagram shows the other half of my research design, with an investigation into this specific application domain. You can start at the top right, where I'm coming out of the first design inquiry cycle, and I've identified the application domain of herding biological sheep. I've designed a strategic scenario that's suitable for the participants and identified some domain experts to contact. In addition to this, and I haven't quite updated the map yet, I'm also conducting site visits. And I was lucky enough to be on a farm on Friday, teaming with a human who was on a quad bike, and I was the sheepdog. It was a bit of a role play. It's running around going yes and yelling. He told me to talk to the sheep, which is interesting because I'm not sure how I'm going to teach the AIs how to do that. But and they had ewes, the mother sheep, and the lambs. It was lambing season, so it was chaos. It was good fun though. I also went to and saw some agricultural drones, and I was in a field. There was a flock of sheep over there. There were the drones here, and there was a group of students from Western Sydney University coming to watch this demonstration, these drones. And I was like, if you could just put it together, you would have the research project right there. But no one's connected the dots yet, so who knows? So in conclusion, and to summarize the journey so far, I presented my motivation and key concepts from curriculum theory, machine education, future studies, and design research. I've linked these to my research questions and provided an overview of my research design and methodology. I've introduced a novel synthesis in machine education design futures and described its enactment through interviews and questionnaires. I've given a very quick overview of some of the outcomes of the work so far and shown you how I plan to continue this exciting work. There's lots more to be done, but I'm confident that I'm on track for timely completion next year. Right, Eleni? What?
And promise, that's it.
Yeah, it's recorded. As an epilogue, for those of you who were present at my confirmation seminar, rest assured that my son Yamos's real-world shepherding skills are so far vastly superior to those that I've seen in AI. I'd be delighted to hear your thoughts and answer any questions you might have.
We have space for one or two questions or comments. Do you have any questions or comments from the room or the virtual space? Lots of claps online. Thank you, Barney.
With the real increase at the moment in the kind of AI that ChatGPT is an example, kind of that you can kind of visualize the notion of training that kind of AI in a very, kind of verbal sort of way. Do you think that your conceptualization of machine education can be applied to that kind of AI?
Absolutely, yeah. And I've used, you may have noticed some of the slides there, there was a lot of generative AI used in all of the imagery. All of that came from, for example, Midjourney. And I feel it would be almost trivial to generate a course design using ChatGPT-like technologies. Now, how would you, make sure that it's still rigorous, that it's still academic, that it's providing truthful information? I think that's a big part of that kind of curriculum for building the curriculum generation capabilities into the technology. So I'm excited about the prospects for doing that. Whether you can plug a ChatGPT into a drone or one of those, those Boston Dynamics spot dogs and talk to it, I've seen people do that, and that's plausible as well, I think. I mean, more than just plausible, they're doing it. So I definitely see that's the direction I'm taking here.
So, whereas when you started your project, it seemed very niche, whereas it now seems incredibly mainstream and of interest to a much wider audience.
Absolutely, no, thank you for that comment. And I agree. I think the penny dropped a bit in November last year when ChatGPT came out, and I was like, oh, that's what machine education is for. How are we going to structure our learning experiences with these things? So there's a plug for me is that I'll be at the research festival on a debate of how generative AI can be used in higher education. So please come along and we'll see how it goes. Because I think it's a fascinating area.
Cool, and thanks for representing the faculty on that. That's fantastic.
Thanks, Fern, for getting me in.
We've got a couple of questions. I don't know if we have time.
On the chat?
Yeah, so one is
maybe one.
Yeah, no, so choose which one you want to respond. I'm interested to hear how your first interview with the farmers went, especially did they respond positively to the idea of AI, human cooperation for shepherding, and the other was when you talk about safety, what do you mean?
That's a good question. The safety one's the hardest, so I'll leave that to for us to think about later. But interestingly, and I think it relates to Barney's question as well, that farmers generally are so much more open to this stuff since the media coverage that generative AI has come. And maybe a lot of pennies have dropped in a lot of different places because they can see the value of this stuff. That was harder to see, say, a year ago when it was all, very computer science related. So So taking that dimension out of it, it's been really interesting and a lot of excited domain experts who want to get involved. So I'll.
Thank you.